At the beginning of the movie, we meet three people who arrive at an old rundown house that looks like it's been abandoned for years. Liam remarks that even though the place is falling apart, the view outside is absolutely stunning. Scott explains that the house isn't connected to the main power grid, which means they'll have to rely entirely on a generator for electricity. Once inside, Liam asks Holly if she's getting any phone signal, but she shakes her head and says no. Fortunately, they find plenty of fuel for the generator. After checking every room in the house, Liam agrees with Scott and praises the location, convinced it's perfect for what they came to do. Liam starts up the generator and then begins setting up motion-sensitive cameras around the house. Meanwhile, Scott arranges the monitors and other equipment. He reminds Liam to install a special kill switch on the generator to prevent its magnetic field from interfering with their readings. Liam promises he'll take care of it later. In the next scene, Liam jokes about using flight cases as a dining table. Scott admits he's relieved to finally have a permanent control center instead of constantly working from a tiny coffee table. As they talk, they discuss the previous occupants of the house. According to them, whoever lived here seemed to leave in a hurry, abandoning almost everything behind, even items that appeared to belong to a child. A little later, Liam shows Holly a video captured by one of their sensors. The footage contains a strange, unexplained movement. Curious, Holly asks Scott how science is supposed to explain something like that. That night, Liam video calls his children and recites a poem about traveling through the woods to Spook Hill. After wishing his wife good night, he ends the call. Once everyone is asleep, the house falls silent, until the sound of footsteps suddenly echoes through the darkness. At the same time, one of the motion cameras begins moving on its own. The next morning, Liam calls Holly over and shows her footage recorded at 3 a.m. in the hallway. The camera captured a bizarre and mysterious movement that none of them can explain. Scott suggests that a small gap in one of the walls might have created a draft, causing the disturbance. But Liam isn't convinced. He's certain the motion sensor doesn't react to air currents or temperature changes. According to him, the system only activates when all three sensor beams are interrupted by a solid object. To eliminate any doubt, they seal the gap in the wall. Afterward, Liam turns on the camera and begins documenting the details of their first bedroom investigation, mentioning both Holly and Scott by name. Holly addresses any unseen presence that might be in the room, politely asking it to give them some kind of sign if it's there. When no response comes, the team decides to move on and investigate another room. Inside the second room, Holly once again speaks calmly, telling any spirits present not to be afraid. She explains that they're not there to harm them, they simply want to understand them. Even though they don't get any results, they treat it as a normal part of an initial investigation and remain optimistic. Soon after, Scott and Liam find themselves discussing the mathematical formula behind particle displacement in standing waves, diving deeper into the scientific side of their paranormal research while the mystery surrounding the house continues to grow. When Liam can't remember the formula, he suggests that Scott just look it up online. Curious, Holly asks what they're even trying to do, and Scott explains his scientific theory. He believes that if ghosts truly exist, they must be made of some form of matter. According to him, in theory, powerful infrasound waves could disrupt or even break apart their particle structure. Liam immediately laughs at the idea and starts calling Scott Ghostbuster. Scott fires back, saying that trying to trap a ghost would be about as ridiculous as trying to lock helium gas inside a birdcage. Later that night, Liam sets up his camera equipment once again. He listens to the old audio recordings, carefully analyzing every detail. Suddenly, a terrifying noise echoes through the house, followed by a violent vibration. The clock reads exactly 3 a.m. At the same moment, Holly senses that something is wrong. She notices that the front door has mysteriously swung open on its own. Everyone heads outside to investigate, but as they do, the chandelier inside the house begins swaying by itself. After searching the area and finding no new signals or clues, they eventually return to their rooms. Not long afterward, the door opens again. The next morning, Scott explains over the phone that these incidents could still have ordinary causes, such as strong winds or noises coming from the floorboards. However, he admits he isn't completely certain. Wanting more evidence before reaching a final conclusion, he asks for a few more days to continue the investigation, and the insurance company agrees. Liam then points out that according to the earthquake reports, there were no seismic vibrations recorded during the previous night. When Scott suggests that the shaking may have been caused by wind, Liam challenges him, asking how an ordinary breeze could possibly make an entire house shake like that. Then another strange detail comes to light. Just like the night before, the camera had activated by itself at exactly 3 a.m. Since the hallway was completely airtight, there was no way a gust of wind could have triggered it. Faced with the growing amount of evidence, Scott agrees to continue documenting everything based strictly on factual data. He asks Holly to photograph the watchtower's main door and hallway. Meanwhile, to rule out any technical malfunction, he tells Liam to double-check the camera's sensitivity settings. Scott also plans to perform another full scan of the house using a thermal imager. Following his instructions, Holly takes the photographs while Scott carefully scans every room with the thermal camera. After reviewing the images, Holly reports back to Scott that she hasn't found any abnormalities or new signals. Later that evening, Liam admits that the loud bang they heard on the wall the previous night had genuinely terrified him. He says Holly has spent so much time dealing with paranormal activity that she's probably gotten used to it by now. But Holly quickly explains that she still gets scared. To her, it's like someone who's afraid of heights or flying getting on a plane anyway. A way of confronting the fear instead of running from it. That night, everyone goes to sleep and wakes up just before 3 a.m. As soon as the clock strikes 3, the front door slowly swings open on its own, and Scott's instruments begin picking up unusual signals. Suddenly, in a trembling voice, Holly says she can see a man standing right beside the doorway. She explains that the shadowy figure is staring directly at her. A few seconds later, she says it starts moving toward the hallway. Scott's sensors register a faint reading, but it quickly drops back to 0. Holly then says the atmosphere in the room feels strange, almost unnatural. Scott immediately dismisses the comment as unscientific and reminds everyone to focus only on solid, measurable data. The next morning, after reviewing the footage, Scott concludes that the door probably opened because of a normal draft of air. That explanation infuriates Holly. She insists that she clearly saw the shadow of a huge man standing there. Frustrated, she asks Scott why he even hired her if he never intended to trust her observations. Scott calmly argues that a door opening by itself or a chandelier swaying isn't enough to prove the existence of a supernatural presence. Holly fires back, saying ghosts aren't exactly going to step in front of a camera and wave hello. Scott responds that he would be thrilled if they could gather undeniable evidence proving the paranormal is real. But Holly warns him to be careful what he wishes for. When Scott decides they should continue documenting everything in detail, Holly refuses to stay any longer. She believes an evil spirit doesn't want them in the house. Scott counters with scientific reasoning, claiming that even if supernatural forces exist, they typically can't cause direct physical harm. He compares the fear to the thrill of riding a roller coaster. Holly immediately shuts that idea down, saying roller coasters are the last thing she enjoys. Still, the team prepares for another investigation and once again asks the unseen presence to give them a sign or reveal itself. Without warning, Holly says the temperature in the room has dropped dramatically and that it feels ice cold. Strangely, neither Liam nor Scott notice anything unusual. The room feels completely normal to them. Then Holly looks into the darkness and asks the invisible entity a chilling question. "What is your name? And who are you?" Holly suddenly senses something in the air, almost like a thick layer of fog surrounding them. She asks Scott and Liam if they can see anything unusual, but neither of them notices a thing. Once again, Holly is hit by that same terrifying coldness and an overwhelming feeling of deep sadness. As soon as Scott replaces the battery, the equipment starts picking up signals again. That's when Holly notices something extremely strange. The creepy feeling completely disappears the moment she steps outside the doorway. Whatever is causing it seems unable to affect anyone beyond the doorframe. Just then, they hear a mysterious sound. When Scott asks it to repeat itself, the door suddenly slams shut with a deafening bang. This time, even Scott is shaken. Determined to capture proof, Scott comes up with a new plan. He fills the hallway with artificial fog at night and sets up cameras, hoping to finally record the entity clearly. Later that evening, they put the plan into action. Right on schedule, the door slowly swings open by itself. But when no new signals appear, they eventually decide to get some sleep. Not long after, the atmosphere inside the house turns hostile again. The chandelier begins swaying on its own. Suddenly, Holly lets out a terrified scream. Scott and Liam rush to her side. Holly tells them that the invisible shadow is standing right in front of her, and she can't move her arms or legs. Scott grabs her hand and pulls her away from the spot. As they approach the doorway, the door suddenly opens. The moment they step back into the room, a camera is violently hurled straight at them. The next morning, Scott calls the insurance company and explains that their camera has been completely destroyed. He's convinced that an evil spirit is desperately trying to drive them out of the house. The moment he finishes speaking, another unexplained noise echoes through the building. That's the final straw for Liam. He immediately starts packing his belongings and insists on leaving before the spirit attacks again. But Scott refuses. After all, they've finally found the supernatural evidence they've been searching for. Liam questions whether they're still doing their job or if this has become nothing more than Scott's personal obsession. He reminds everyone that they have a vehicle ready and urges them to leave. Scott, however, begs for just one more night. He argues that nobody has ever recorded evidence like this before, and despite everything that's happened, the entity hasn't directly harmed them yet. Liam quickly points out that the spirit literally smashed part of the wall while trying to attack Holly. Eventually, they remember the safe room, the one place in the house where the spirit usually can't enter. Believing it's their best chance, they decide to spend the night there. Later, unable to sleep, they make hot chocolate and share a quiet conversation about the strange atmosphere in the house and the fear that's slowly taking hold of all of them. Suddenly, Holly grabs the window glass and feels a strange icy chill running through it. A second later, the glass shatters without warning. Then the front door slowly swings open on its own. When Holly goes to investigate, the evil spirit immediately tries to attack her. Moments later, a table is lifted into the air and hurled in their direction. As the spirit relentlessly chases them, they rush into the safe room, a place the entity cannot enter. Scott starts wondering why this particular room is blocking the spirit. Liam believes the spirit simply doesn't want them there and insists they should pack their things and leave as soon as possible. But instead of running away, Scott decides to fight back using a scientific approach. He plans to use sound displacement technology to drive the entity out. Scott argues that if they run at the first sign of a ghost, they have no right to call themselves ghost hunters. Determined to prove his theory, he prepares his scientific equipment, while Holly decides to rely on her own occult methods. Seeing an opportunity, Scott and Liam sprint to their vehicle to grab the necessary instruments. At that moment, the evil spirit makes another attempt to attack Holly, forcing her to quickly retreat back into the safe room. Soon, Scott and Liam return with the equipment, and both Scott and Holly begin preparing their respective methods. Scott explains that his technology will generate deep bass frequencies, powerful enough to suppress the entity, far more effectively than any ritual or spell. Holly disagrees, warning that such an approach will only anger the spirit even more. Then another problem arises. The generator suddenly shuts down. Liam realizes it has run out of fuel. Scott quickly assigns tasks. Liam will refuel the generator while he finishes setting up the soundwave system. The moment the door opens, the evil spirit lunges at Scott. Holly realizes her own method isn't working. Liam manages to reach the generator room and starts refueling the machine, while Scott continues setting up his equipment. Meanwhile, the spirit unleashes complete chaos throughout the house. Finally, Liam gets the generator running again, and Scott powers up his device. After a few tense moments, the atmosphere inside the house begins to change. The violent activity stops, and an eerie silence takes over. To be sure, Holly carefully checks the house and confirms that the evil spirit is finally gone. The next day, Scott calls the insurance company and tells them that their mission was a success. With everything seemingly over, the team starts packing up their equipment. But while getting ready to leave, Liam notices a section of the wall that looks strangely frozen. He immediately calls Scott over to take a look. When they break through the wall, they discover a hidden staircase leading down into the basement. Scott asks Holly to take photos of the newly uncovered area while he decides to investigate below. A few moments later, Scott shouts from downstairs saying he's found a secret room and tells the others to come down. As soon as Holly enters the room, she notices countless scratch marks carved into the walls. At the same time, Scott's EMF meter suddenly starts picking up strong readings. Holly senses something terrifying and warns everyone that another evil spirit is down there with them. Then they spot something horrifying, a figure chained to a chair. Almost instantly, Holly begins struggling to breathe. Panicking, she rushes back upstairs. Scott and Liam quickly follow her out. Using her supernatural abilities, Holly realizes what happened there years ago. The large, sinister entity they encountered earlier had once chained a woman in that room and left her there to die. In the next scene, they call the police and show them the hidden basement. Scott explains that after driving out the spirit, they noticed an unnaturally cold section of the wall. Breaking it open led them to the secret staircase. He also points out the deep scratch marks on the door, suggesting that someone had been imprisoned there. Suddenly, Liam comes running up from the basement with shocking news. The mummified body that had been chained to the chair is gone. Nobody can believe it. How could a dead body simply disappear? The police begin questioning their story, but before anyone can figure it out, the entire house starts shaking violently. Without warning, Holly collapses to the floor. Her eyes turn completely white. A few moments later, she snaps back to normal and delivers a terrifying revelation. She says they've made a huge mistake. The spirit they forced out wasn't trying to hurt them at all. It had actually been warning them and trying to drive them away from the house to protect them from the true evil lurking inside, the spirit of a monstrous witch. But by then, it was already too late. The witch attacks the two police officers first, brutally taking them down. Then she turns her attention to Scott. As Liam and Holly try to escape, the evil spirit grabs Holly and begins dragging her toward the basement. Liam manages to save her at the last second, but the witch immediately retaliates by taking Liam instead. Desperate for help, Holly runs outside. But before she can get away, a hand suddenly bursts out of the ground, grabs her, and drags her back toward the basement. Holly fights desperately to escape, but a chain suddenly wraps around her neck. The unseen force pulls her deeper into the darkness below. And with that chilling final image, the movie comes to an end.